Here's the thing about people pulling away from church as a source to finding answers, is that then they begin turning to culture. And here's the problem with that. Culture is fast, and it's changing, and it's complex, and it's hard to pin down, and it's fast and blurry, as Austin has said recently. It's moving at breakneck speed, and when we look at culture to find answers for at the crux of who we are and what we're called to do, we begin struggling with finding answers about our identity. And Austin, that's definitely a trend that we've seen accelerate in our culture is identity. Now, we can think about this in 100 different ways when it comes to identity and how we identify and things like that. But we want to get to the point of this roundtable. Really, the crux of what we seek to do as a ministry is to get at the core of what's going on in culture, not just talk about the fruit that comes from it, but what's at the root of what's going on. And so when we look at the fast and blurry culture, as people turn to that for answers, and people are struggling to find where their identity can be discovered, Austin, how do we make sense of this and move forward through it?
Yeah. So I've thought a lot about how do we recognize things in culture, because culture it's the air we breathe. A lot of it's just assumed and it's brought in. And I think what culture is doing is it's describing what's being normalized and assumed. So think like, what are these norms? And the norm that I've seen consistently now is there's consistent change in the pluralization of ideas. And that's where you get it's really, really fast and it's really, really blurry, because there's information at our fingertips. I mean, I was thinking last night, I saw the news of the tragic plane crash last night in DC 5 minutes after it happened. Like, when does that happen other than if you're like tuned into the news online? I mean, information it's coming at us so fast, and then there's great competing ideas. Everyone has their version of truth nowadays. Everyone has their opinion, and things get really blurry, really, really blurry. And I think what that's led to with a lot of young people is there's a great dissatisfaction. There's an excellent book right here. It's called You Are Not Your Own by Alan Noble. And he goes through kind of like, what are the ills of the society? What is this fast and blurry culture leading to in the ills of society? He says, like, in sex and love, we're feeling ill and sick, in meaning, in the careers and work and how we rest, how we live, and our mental health has been talked about, how we consume things. In all areas of life, people just feel this sickness and a deep dissatisfaction. And one of the things that he says in his book, and I quote Alan, he says, no single cause can explain the presence of these social ills, but they share important characteristics. They are systemic in nature, they are inhuman, and this is the key here, and they all rely on a particular set of assumptions about what it means to be human. All of these sicknesses, they rely on a particular set of assumptions of what it means to be human. And I think like that fundamental dissatisfaction is the question of identity. Who are we as human beings? And I look at what are the two foremost questions that young people are asking today. They're asking, do I matter and where do I belong? It's do I matter and where do I belong? I think of like at every major turn of life event with young people, whether it's like a college application, a job application. In job applications, what do they ask? They ask, what are your strengths and weaknesses and why should we hire you? Well, that's a question about, do I matter? What are my strengths and weaknesses? And then should I hire you? Should you belong here? And what's your value to us? I was watching a short film last week that a high schooler did for their class project. And it was a coming of age story. And the coming of age story had this line. It said, at every major life turn, you have to figure out who you are, and then you have to advertise it for someone else to accept you. At every major turn in life, you have to figure out who you are and then advertise it for someone to accept you. And I think most people, they're answering this question today in the fast and blurry culture with, well, how do I find my identity? Do I matter? Where do I belong? Well, I get to define that. Like there's a huge rise in what's called expressive individualism nowadays. There's been a lot of talk on this, but basically it's like my identity is not given from an outside source. I'm not going to look to an institution to define me. I'm going to look to my intuition to define me.
Hmm.
So it's like, what are my desires? What do I want? I just want to be happy. I mean, it's self-definition is the ruler of identity nowadays. In the Barna study that came out last year, the Gen Z Volume 3, they talk about what is shaping Gen Z's and young people's sense of self. And what they found is that it's equally their hobbies and their pastimes as their family background and upbringing. So you're equally going to be defined by your desires as your family. And being fed this message that's fast and blurry of, well, you do you, you live your truth, follow your heart. Like these are the cultural mantras of today. I think young people are feeling this tug and like they see this. There's equal, do I follow my desire or do I follow my family? Am I defined by someone else? You can't run away from being defined by someone else. But I think most people are like, I just want to follow my desires. It's self-definition. And like it can sound freeing for people. Oh, I get to define myself. I get to choose my happiness. No one else is going to define me. But I also think it's deeply burdening. And this is what we need to share with people. Like if you define yourself, you are responsible for finding a life of purpose. You're responsible for defining you. You're responsible for creating your meaning, your own morality and value system. You are responsible for finding a group to which you belong. And I think it's an illusion. And I mean, we know this as Christians, defining yourself by anything other than God is building a life on something other than what you were created for. And that leads to instability and anxiety because it is inherently unstable. And it makes me think of the parable in Matthew 7, where Jesus is talking about anyone who hears my words and puts them into practice is like a wise man who builds his house on a solid rock. To build our identity on our desires is building it on sinking sand, where like the pressures of life will come in, the rain will come in, pain and hurt, change, going to college, applying for a job, being denied, having friends hurt you. Like that creates identity crises in people's lives because the sand is just washed away from under them. So what do I see that's the trend is that it's a fast and blurry culture that says, you do you, live your truth. And therefore, the two questions that people ask, do I matter and do I belong, they're answered with self-definition, and that's inherently unstable. And it leads people to being anxious, being unstable, and dissatisfied. And those questions, do I matter and do I belong, still remain. So I think that's the major trend. And now what's the truth? I think there's an apologetic needed today, giving a reason for what we believe. And that I think we can give reason and apologetic on how do we find inner peace. Like that's a huge thing for people. They're dissatisfied and I want inner peace. So inner peace and finding that can be an apologetic opportunity for Christianity. And I think it's getting to that identity. There's a book that's been hugely influential in my life by Josh McDowell that we have at our ministry. It's See Yourself as God Sees You. Yeah. And what Josh does is he goes through, we're not like defined by ourselves. We are defined by who God has created us to be. And he gives three truths that are really, really important. And that's that you are lovable, that you are valuable, and that you are competent. And I think these are things that young people are striving for today. And I mean, they're like silently crying out with their actions. I want to be loved. I want to feel valuable. I want someone to tell me I'm competent. I mean, we're lovable in that God doesn't make mistakes. We're loved. We're eternally lovable. I think of Jeremiah 31:3. I have loved you with an everlasting love. Or 1 John 4:19. We love because he loved us first. That's foundational. And then you're valuable. I remember years ago when going through counseling from porn addiction and growing and finding freedom, there was this realization that I had with a lot of shame and guilt in my life for what I had been struggling with of like, I feel horrible about myself and I don't like myself. I feel like I don't have any value because of what I have done. And I remember in this moment of realizing this through counseling and working with a guide, and there's just this moment of realizing I don't like myself. And then almost this, like, the Holy Spirit spoke to me in that moment. If you're not valuable, then why did Jesus die for you? If you're not valuable, then why did Jesus die for you? I mean, that's a message that will touch people. You're not worthless. Your worth is declared in Jesus' death on the cross for you. And then finally, you're competent. I mean, the young people, they want to get behind a cause. And to say, like, man, because you're created in God's image, that comes with a core responsibility of stewardship and creation care here on earth. And when we surrender our lives to Christ, we're filled with the Holy Spirit, and you've been uniquely gifted with gifts and passions to love, to do justice, to forgive, to redeem this broken world. We're lovable, we're valuable, and we're competent. And I think these three truths, what they do is, in a fast and blurry culture, this is an identity that's clear and stable. So when the world is shifting and things are moving and you've got truth claims thrown at you and it's all just a bunch of good advice, this is clear and stable. And it's not based upon how you feel. It's based upon who God created you to be, how he's revealed himself in Jesus' death on the cross. And I think that's the big takeaway is this is clear and stable and people actually want it. And I think also what we can do is live into this. If we understand this ourselves, I've always thought, like, people haven't always come to Christ through like 3 arguments for God's existence or a classical apologetic approach. Those things are really, really important. But I would argue that most people have been so attracted to Christianity, attracted to the faith, because their neighbors were behaving differently. They love themselves well. They love their families well. They love their communities well. They loved others well. And in that, people see something that's desirable and that's really, really intriguing. So, like, it starts with, do I love this or do I understand this myself, who I am? It's not based upon how I feel. It's based upon who God has created me to be. I'm lovable, valuable, and competent. Therefore, I love others well. I mean, that's a deeply desirable thing for a culture that's stuck in, I just create myself and it's how I feel.